What's up, everybody, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is April 6th, 2021. This is episode 18, and thank you for joining me for The Truth Beneath the Surface. Tonight, we'll be getting into part 3 of our series on James Casbolt's book, Agent Buried Alive. But before that, I wanted to thank all of you in my audience for stopping by to listen, first and foremost. I don't take a single one of you for granted. I mean, you being here to listen truly is a dream come true for me. And I also want to thank the few people who have donated to the platform. These are very generous people who have decided to financially contribute to my vision of expanding the reach of the show and increasing the quality of the platform and its possibilities into the future. So I just want to thank those people so much. And of course, everyone else who has been subscribing to the channel and liking the videos and sharing the videos. It just means the world to me. I mean, I really envision this platform as a massive rallying point for patriots and a show that's committed to truth. And as I said before, allegiance to the concerns of ordinary, hardworking, decent American people and people worldwide, really, fall into that category who desire to have their voice amplified. So I'm honored to be that voice for you. I have my commitment that I'll work hard to bring you my very best effort to help you learn and remain informed. So I have big plans for the platform if it continues to be successful. But of course, you need resources and capital to do that. So please, if you're in a position to, consider making a donation on Patreon. I provided a link in the description of the video. And I'm also working on getting my Subscribestar account verified. That's taking a little while, and that also will be used to accept donations as well. So I'll let everyone know when that option is available. So please donate if you can, and spread the links to anyone who will listen and help me expand the reach of the show. I thank you, and God bless all of you. Okay. So, all right. So where do we want to begin tonight? So last night we took quite a journey down the rabbit hole, and tonight we continue our exploration of the book, and we pick it up at the beginning of chapter 2, which is called, quote, The Return of the Watchers. So Casbolt, and again, for those of you who haven't joined me for the previous podcast, this is now, what did I say, episode 18. So I began this series in episode 16, and I'm doing a series taking the audience through the details of this book. So this is now part 3, but we're on chapter 2 of the book. So he begins, the author, by mentioning that his book includes official letters of recommendation from high-level operatives in the intelligence community, including a member of the 33rd degree of Zion Illuminati. That's a quote from his book. So this individual holds, and I'm going to be throwing a lot of terms at you tonight, so try to see if you can, get these terms compartmentalized. It took me a little while. There's a lot of information. So this individual holds what's called an Umbra 8 security clearance. That's spelled UMBRA-8 security clearance, which is 8 levels above top secret. Okay, which apparently, I think only about 500 people in the United States even have that security clearance. So this individual apparently works in various DUMs all over Tennessee. Now, James Casbolt said that he is considered a military genius by members of the intelligence community for his high level of accuracy in a topic that we've discussed a lot on this show, which is remote viewing vectors, or RV for short. So he points out at the time of the publication of this book, he had recently completed RV work, remote viewing work for, quote, Lincoln, and that was his Illuminati contact. So what he calls his vector intention, that's another quote, his vector intention was basically set at 2 locations. So he worked out of primarily 2 locations to do these remote viewing tasks. And one was Fort Meade in Maryland, which is, of course, NSA headquarters. And the second place was a DUM in Oak Ridge, North Carolina. And he also mentions completing RV work at an underwater facility in Greece, off the coast of Corfu, I believe it was. And the quote chrysanthemum, the chrysanthemum, excuse me, that's CHRYSANTHEUM, chrysanthemum underground biogenetics facility in New Mexico. All right, so he's pointing out all these different locations where he's done this type of work. So he says that even Lincoln, his Illuminati contact with Umbra 8 security clearance, ran into a brick wall when he was trying to access James Casbolt's Project Mannequin files. All right, so Casbolt's Project Mannequin files are so highly classified that all of the documents are what are considered, now here's another term, Class 8, meaning they can't be accessed on any NSA database, and they must be collected by hand and read on paper. And this kind of reminds me of the self-destructing messages made famous in Mission Impossible stories, but this is apparently the way these Class 8 documents are handled. Okay, they're not even put onto a database because they're afraid of potential incursions. Okay, but the reader or operative must have an immediate need to know. All right, and there's no risk of electronically intercepting this information or these communications. Okay, so Casbolt says his files are stored in a secure NSA facility, or actually multiple facilities, I believe, in both England and the United States. All right, so Class 8 files, particularly remote viewing RV sessions, are stored in a vault at Fort Meade in Maryland. That, and I'm gonna quote here. He says, contains hardware so advanced it can detect other remote viewers through tiny fluctuations in air, and then disable them with electromagnetic scalar waves. And then he goes on and he says that an individual whose code name was Silas, that's Sylus, and this person was an NSA operative, located and basically, given Casbolt and the British Intel faction working with him in an effort to facilitate his programming, this individual Silas, although he was deeply embedded in Project Mannequin, he couldn't access over half of his files. So this, of course, underscores just how secretive Project Mannequin is, or was. Hopefully it's no more, even for those who have direct involvement. Okay, so then he goes on to say that the people who run the project at AL-499 facility, and again, that's the underground facility where Project Mannequin was carried out, are what he puts a, quote, hardline military regime. These are the people that run it, okay? He says are a, quote, hardline military regime that is ultimately a religious cult centered around the corrupt Zionists and Rosicrucians. He goes on to say that these places where these, in these domes, they're actually religious centers where so-called black magic rites are performed. Ancient deities are worshipped, and children are both trained and, of course, sacrificed, as we know. And he also points out that Leo Zagami, who is a former Illuminati member, who actually I've seen him appear many times on InfoWars. I'm sure those of you who have seen InfoWars have as well. Said that, quote, black magic, which is the control of electromagnetic energy for harm, is the oldest form of military technique known to man. That's a quote from Leo Zagami. So Casbolt then mentions that the mainstream media only reports, of course, stories of how third world countries force children to fight and to kill for their country. But he says this practice is going on in developed countries all over the world. And Casbolt would know from firsthand experience, this is exactly what happened to him. Even before birth, I mentioned before that he was sold by his parents into this program, which creates super spies and assassins. So he says that more and more awareness about these programs is coming to light by those who have defected. And Casbolt is considered the youngest survivor of mind control projects in modern history. To give us a better understanding of Project Mannequin, he provides a basic description of the belief system of the people who run it. So, know your enemy, folks. So before he gets into it, he's very clear, though, to point out, as I have been on my show, that he's not attacking either the Rosicrucians or the Zionists as a whole. And then, indeed, many good people involved in these orders have aided him in both his escape from this life as well as his recovery and his efforts to expose all these people and stop the horrors of the program. All right, so he says he considers these good people amongst the Rosicrucians and the Zionists, or basically within the Illuminati, and I'm going to talk more about this. He says he considers these people to be his kinsmen. So it's important to remember moving forward that good and evil exists within these ancient orders, which he then goes on to describe. So to his understanding, many of the secret religious orders, such as the Magi, the Zoroastrians, I'm not even sure how to pronounce that. It's spelled Zoroastrians, Zoroastrians, something like that. Also the 33rd degree of Zion, which I mentioned, the White Lotus Society, etc. All these secret religious orders are divided into two main factions. And one of these factions is loyal to their belief in the so-called fallen angels, who are loyal to the fallen angel Lucifer at the time of the great flood mentioned in the Bible. The other faction of these secret societies base their teaching around Christian principles and the ancient book of Enoch, which is a very interesting story that goes along with that, which I'm going to discuss. So there's now an open war between these two factions that's been going on, probably forever, but certainly to Casbolt's knowledge within the intelligence community had been going on for decades. Okay, so there's this open war between these two factions, those that are loyal to Lucifer and those that are loyal to God and to Christ. And Casbolt mentions that the term fallen angels translates from Hebrew into Greek as, quote, watchers. And this, of course, is a reference to the title of chapter 2, which is called Return of the Watchers. Now, the book of Enoch was targeted for elimination from Scripture by St. Augustine somewhere between 354 and 430 AD. And the argument was that the book was too old or too antiquated to continue to be relevant. So they basically subjugated this book and it went underground. And there was also a rabbi at the time, Simeon ben Jochai, that's Jochai. And again, forgive me, folks, if I get the pronunciations wrong. So this rabbi actively worked to suppress knowledge about the book of Enoch. All right, he helped push the study of the book underground by declaring, quote, all are cursed who believe angels are flesh and blood beings that physically came to earth, end quote. Casbolt continues saying, quote, this is exactly what they are or were. However, what we know as, quote, angels are extraterrestrial beings. Now, I know for a lot of people, this concept may be in direct conflict with what you've been taught, but that's the entire point. I assume that because you're listening to this show, you have an open mind, which I believe is going to be increasingly important to maintain as time goes on, and the more truth is revealed as the Great Awakening unfolds. All right, so whether or not this is true, I don't know, but it's interesting. It's an interesting theory. Okay, so the belief in physical angels, which are essentially were, according to Casbolt, extraterrestrials, was labeled by the religious establishment of the time as heresy, of course. So the text of the book of Enoch, which teaches otherwise, went underground into the hands and practices of secret societies. So the benevolent sections of the Illuminati, which I didn't even know existed, to be honest, before I really started studying this. And so the benevolent sections of the Illuminati and other secret societies are loyal to God. So Casbolt then explains why the real secrets of Freemasonry are taught at the 33rd degree. He says, quote, "The Watchers descended from other planets onto Earth in ancient times onto Mount Hermon in the Middle East. This mountain is on the 33rd degree latitude." He then continues, quote, "When you reach the 33rd degree of Masonry, you enter the Illuminati degrees and are taught the secrets of the angels." So it's important to understand that even the Illuminati and Freemasons have both good and bad factions, and not all of them are members of the cabal. And I know, even from my own, podcasts and such, I tend to use the Illuminati and kind of make that synonymous with the cabal. And what he's pointing out is that there are good members in the Illuminati as well as the Freemasons. Okay. However, those involved in Project Mannequin are clearly associated with the dark side of the Illuminati and hence the cabal. So Casbolt then goes on to discuss that while participation in Project Mannequin and other projects like it makes an individual stronger and wiser in many ways, it also creates what he calls a bloodlust, which has caused many to fall into addiction. Others have committed suicide after struggling for years with depression, with panic disorders, and things like that. So Casbolt talks about the use of children in the project being especially reprehensible and of course, a main motivating factor for him to get this information out. And in reflecting on why he was chosen for Project Mannequin, Casbolt says, quote, "The Illuminists will argue that only individuals trained from childhood in certain, quote, blood trials where each level becomes more dangerous can survive the military campaigns they will carry out as adults. They say this is not just a matter of national security for any one country, but the survival of the human race." He then poses the question, quote, "What is so horrific that a soldier must be trained from early childhood to endure?" End quote. And then I'm going to continue. This is his answer to that question. Quote, "The shocking answer is that Project Mannequin operatives will come face to face, sometimes even in conflict situations, with malevolent and terrifying extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional life forms. These, quote, xenobreeds are so terrifying to witness the sight of one could kill or drive insane most ordinary men." Whoa. Then he adds, quote, "This may sound laughable to the uneducated civilian, but is taken deadly serious by those in the highest corridors of power." End quote. And after that, he then goes on to describe an infamous conflict called the Dulce battle, Dulce, which took place apparently in the 1960s. And I guess what happened were scientists at this genetics facility were taken hostage by reptilian-like extraterrestrial life forms who had been working with the United States government underneath the New Mexico desert. And the special forces teams who went in for the attempted rescue had to be hypnotized and drugged to cope with the situation. Most of that's a quote. I maybe paraphrased a little. He then adds, and I have echoed the same sentiment many times in my show. He says, quote, "Keep an open mind. Arm yourself with the truth, as this situation has come to a head on this planet and will be in your face in the upcoming years. And remember this book." That was the end of the quote. And remember, this book came out in 2008. Okay. So we're at that point right now as we speak. Things have come to a head. They were coming to a head back in 2008 and it's 2021. Okay. So in the next section, he starts talking about Project Paperclip, which was started in 1945 and run by both British intelligence and an American organization called the OSS, which stands for Office of Strategic Services, I believe. And he says that Project Paperclip basically involved the Allies bringing the top leading Nazi scientists in mind control, genetic engineering, and all these other technical areas to America and to Britain after the Second World War. All right. And then he continues, quote, the CIA was created 2 years after this in the American National Security Act of 1947 to handle the massive number of mind control, cloning, and other covert projects that were born from Paperclip, end quote. So the NSA, which, by the way, was created on, I believe, was 1952, he points out the NSA is a sister organization to the CIA, which has grown even more powerful. And it was created during the pivotal year of 1947, which just so happens to be the same year of the Roswell crash, as well as the formation of Israel. He mentions that. Now, how the formation of Israel ties in, I'm not sure yet. That we should probably wait a little while before we get into that conversation, but that is also tied in to this whole puzzle. Okay, so a year later, in 1948, this is a quote here. He says, a genetic bloodline study was started in Britain to locate gifted children to be used for espionage by the intelligence community. This was called Project Anvil, but changed its name to Project Oaktree in the 1950s. Project Oaktree, that was the end of that quote. So Project Oaktree, right, was under the command of the NSA and was connected to all of the major hospitals in the United Kingdom. And it was also connected to Project Mannequin. So the objective of Project Oaktree was to locate the descendants of the tribe of Dan, which is the so-called lost tribe of Israel. All right. And these were white-skinned Middle Eastern people, or very light-skinned Middle Eastern people. And the descendants were not actually lost, but kept secret. Some refer to the lost tribe of Dan as the, quote, British Israelites, end quote. That's how light their skin was. Now, the tribe of Dan traveled from Dan, which was just below Mount Hermon, biblical times, and went up into Greece around the time of the Exodus in the Bible. And when in Greece, when they got to Greece, they became known as the Spartans. And then they eventually migrated to France, where they became the Merovingian priests, kings, and other French royal lines. And this, of course, the Merovingian, which, again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I should probably double check that with someone, is one of the 13 bloodline families, which I talked about in some detail in episode 4. Okay, so in addition, the tribe of Dan descendants were known as the Tuatha De Danann. I'm not going to spell that, but that's a quote from the book. And that was, I guess, what they were known as in Ireland, Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, and Celtic clans such as the Campbells in Scotland. Okay, so these people were worshippers of the goddess of energy, Ishtar, which you may have heard of. And they were heavily into animal shamanism, such as bird and snake symbology. And Casbolt points out that the eagle is one of their symbols, and that the eagle on the American coat of arms and the NSA symbol both represent the tribe of Dan. And then he adds, quote, the owl is another of their symbols, which represents the angel Ishtar, end quote. So the tribe of Dan is a holy bloodline with powerful PSI or psychic abilities established over centuries of ritual practice, encoded, which then encodes this into their genetic memory. Now, the Luciferian religions believe that attacking people of this bloodline, particularly through the abuse of children of this bloodline, is thought to be a ritual intended to directly attack God. So, The Watchers had both good and evil factions, and Casbolt also points out that the Archangel Michael is named as a physical watcher in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I found very interesting. Okay, so at the end of chapter 2, he references what he calls the battle between the sons of light versus the sons of darkness, which rages on to this day behind the scenes by these bloodline groups. And he mentions that some say that Project Oaktree was ultimately looking for the human descendants of the Watchers. And finally, he suggests that that God's 12 tribes of Israel were not just God's chosen people, as it's taught in Sunday school and Hebrew school, but rather they were called Watchers on their account of their ability to, quote, project their consciousness out of their body to perform ancient forms of advanced remote viewing. Wow. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 2. Okay, so I've discussed a lot about how the Great Awakening, in my previous podcast, I've discussed a lot about how the Great Awakening will involve the fusion of religion and science, right? And hopefully tonight's episode and analysis give you a clearer picture of what I meant by that. Okay, everyone, thanks for listening. Spread the links to the show, and please consider making a donation to support the channel. As I said, I should be back tomorrow, God willing, with part 4 as we get into chapter 3 of Casbolt's book. And that chapter is entitled The Modern History of Behavior Modification. There's a little preview of what we're going to be getting into tomorrow. Until then, God bless all of you, and thank you again for joining me in an effort to discover the truth beneath the surface. Much love, everyone. Thank you for listening. God bless. Patriot out.